uses her extensive training in private practice. Questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, good evening, everyone. Christ is risen. Welcome to Live with the Louhs. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us. My name is Father Nicholas Lowe, and I'm joined by my wife and co-host, Dr. Roxanne Lowe.
Happy to be with everyone this evening.
And as many of you know, Roxanne is a clinical psychologist, and I'm the parish priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church right here in Jacksonville, Florida. And if you're new to Live with the Louhs, you should know that our show is a show that really, our hope and our prayer is that it's a show that merges both faith and psychology to really give you what we like to call practical Christianity, ways that you can truly apply your faith in your everyday life. So once again, thanks so much for being with us. Before we get into tonight's really cool topic, I do want to invite all of you just to stay connected to us through our social media platforms. Friends, we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, actually all under the headings of The Louhs. And that last name is quite unique. It's spelled Louhs. That's Louhs. So all go into any of those social media platforms, put in the Louhs, and you'll be able to connect with us. And in fact, if you're wanting to listen to any of our sermons, they're all archived on the Louhs YouTube channel. So do us a favor and maybe just go and subscribe so that you can receive those messages every single week. And recently, as many of you may know, we published our second book right here with Ancient Faith Publishing called 6 Hours, 7 Lessons, How Christ's Light Transcends Our Darkness. And you know what we are firmly convicted of and believe in our heart is that sadly all of us at some point in our life will experience a 9/11 moment, a moment in which that really turns our world upside down. And what you all need to know is that our Savior is such an amazing God that I love it in the baptism service, Roxanne. It talks about how that Christ couldn't stand to see the human race being tormented by the devil, so he came and he saved us. And then it goes on to say that therefore we will proclaim his beneficence, we will never hide his mercy, he has set us free. But that freedom came with a cost on the cross. And while Christ is sitting on the cross, or hanging on the cross that he freely chose for all of us, he utters these 7 extraordinary statements. We call these really life principles to live by. But on what we call Good Friday, it was an awful day, it was an awful Friday for Christ. But in the midst of his agony, he thought about you and me, and to give us these principles to live by when we go through our difficult, our dark Fridays. And so you can find this book right here at Ancient Faith Publishing. Just go to store.ancientfaith.com. Just look up 6 Hours, 7 Lessons. It's only been out for a few weeks, and by God's grace, already so many people have already written really positive reviews about it. So we're really excited about it. And as we did with Renewing You, all of the proceeds of our books go to outreach ministries in our church. So we're just excited about that as well. And as always, friends, we'd love to hear from you. We truly believe that growth happens in the conversation, especially with tonight's topic. So I'd love for you to call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. So let's get started. You know, friends, in many ways, if you were to think about your life like a pie, where there's different slices, we're living in a world more and more that is kind of compartmentalizing our world and compartmentalizing our life. We can have so many different areas of our life that are open, that are filled with things that we need to do, things that are assignments that have to get done. And yes, God yearns for us to be goal-oriented. He yearns for us to have goals that we want to accomplish. But in many ways, what we're seeing in the world right now is really a fragmentation of our lives to the point where many of us are just feeling drained, really a lack of meaning, almost even a lack of purpose, and a lack of using the gifts that God has given us to make a difference in this world. So we thought we'd dedicate a show to really talking about this topic. And tonight we're so blessed to have 2 true and great friends of our show, both Cynthia Damaskos and Molly Sabourin, who are going to talk to us tonight. Let me just say a little bit about them both. They both are the co-founders of Filled with Less, which is a ministry that we have talked about here on our show. It's devoted to helping others achieve a peaceful mind, healthy body, and productive life. I think all of us yearn for that. Cynthia is a certified holistic health coach, and the author of The Holistic Woman. Molly is the author of Close to Home, and together they have a podcast called Filled with Less, right here on Ancient Faith Radio, and numerous other offerings on their website, all designed to bring more light into people's lives through the perspective of our Orthodox Christian faith. And so, Cynthia and Molly, as always, it's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so
Thank you for having us.
Yes, we're thrilled to be with you.
So, Molly, I guess let's get started with you. I mean, for those who are not familiar with your ministry, just spend some time talking about the extraordinary work that you guys are doing and really the vision and the mission of your ministry.
So our ministry, it's actually evolved quite a bit over the 4 years. When we first started in 2019, it was a lot to do the less referred to physical clutter. And
I remember that, yes.
Remember, so that's kind of how we came into that. For me, realizing how physical clutter was really impacting my productiveness, my fruitfulness, my inner peace. And over time, we really began to see how that physical clutter was so related to our mental clutter, our spiritual clutter. And not only that, but we had so much clutter and toxins now. It was, Cynthia being a nutrition coach as well, like we're looking at all the toxins we take in through our food, through our thoughts, through what we see, through and really Filled with Less became this ministry of, I would say, detoxification. Decluttering our souls, decluttering our schedules, detoxifying our bodies and our minds. And I think that's what's led us to this, where we're at now with this program, like you said, that this concerted effort to use our free will to walk away from fragmentation and come back to wholeness.
That's just beautiful, and I think something that speaks into the souls of so many who listen and who are struggling with those very those very issues in today's world. Cynthia, what do you feel is the biggest threat, to our well-being and just our souls in general? Speaking into what Molly was just talking about.
I think the biggest threat is stress. And stress takes on so many different avenues. Number one is physical stress, the stress we're putting our bodies under with what we're eating and lack of activity. And of course, that lowers our immune system and it keeps us from digesting our food as well. We're not absorbing our nutrients, so then that ends up affecting our mind and our mental stress, our emotional stress. Mentally, we have stress from having sort of a scarcity mindset. And then spiritually, we become stressed because suddenly we don't feel like we're as in touch with our Creator as we want to be. And because of the overwhelm that all of this stress brings on, we're not living our lives the way we want to live them. And then there's the guilt, and then there's the shame, and that's more stress. And so I really think that is the crux of a lot of the illness in the world today.
And it's so interesting as we oftentimes talk about stress here. I mean, I think all of us experience it. I know we do. And I think for so many people, they're oftentimes not even aware of just how impactful stress is having. I know it's the number one visit to the doctor's office. The scriptures talk about this extensively from cover to cover about the concern about stress. And I think in some ways, I wouldn't even say in some ways, I think in many ways, this becomes a spiritual battle, as you were just alluding to, Cynthia, where I think the enemy speaks the loudest when we're the weakest, when we're the tiredest, when we're the most stressed out. And there's so many areas of our life that already create stress for us, just inherently that they are. And then you have sometimes predispositions that we all have in our own lives that also, challenge us with that stress as well. And then you add what's going on in the world, and it's so easy to just continue to pile on stress. So that even if you take a break and you get like this message that maybe we're sharing tonight, you get a little break from a topic or an area, then right around the corner there's another thing that's going to remind you of the need to be stressed. It's almost like an epidemic that I think is impacting so many people, much of which I don't think we're even aware of.
Yeah, and Molly, maybe you could speak into this a little bit, but I do think with this chronic stress that many of us experience, I think that it is very hard to try to swim against the grain, with the pace that life moves us in and demands of us often. it is really hard to kind of hit the pause button and say, no, I'm going to be different. And it sort of feels like, you can't keep up. And when you say no to one thing, it's like, okay, but then that thing's still waiting. And so it just sort of feels like there's this vicious cycle. So that's sort of the external stress. But then we also, I find a lot of people deal with sort of internal dispositions that invoke stress even when there's nothing externally facing them, just chronic, increased frequency of negative emotion, and they feel a negative emotion more frequently, more intensely. And so their intrinsic disposition sort of creates a stress as well. And so I'm sort of curious as to, and maybe both speak into this, but Molly, what do you see as sort of the primary cause of this kind of chronic stress that we're facing?
Well, I think what you said is so true. So many of us are on autopilot. It's almost like we don't even realize how stressed we are. And at some point, it requires a lot of just stopping and taking a look at the bigger picture, doing a little bit of inner work. And so for me, like again, I talked earlier about fragmentation, and it's helpful, I think, to go back and say, let's just look at what's happened, right? Let's take stock a little bit. And you see, as we started with, we start to get our iPhones, our smartphones. Now these are part of our lives. And with that came all kinds of innovation, all kinds of new ways to communicate, as we know, just limitless possibilities. But that has also ushered in that fragmentation, right? So what that looks like mentally now is that we are in two different worlds at all time. Where our world was once very small, we could stay focused. We had our local church, our local jobs, our family members. Now at all times our feet are in two worlds. And as we're trying to go about our everyday business, ding, ding, your phone's buzzing. That other world is constantly interrupting you, right? And you have a physical response to that notification. And what you and the result of that is what you see is difficulty staying on task, difficulty being present in a conversation. There's a lot of procrastination, a lot of avoidance, so much decision fatigue. People are so tired of making decisions based on so many limitless choices. Sometimes even making dinner at night can feel absolutely impossible, right? And so this is like a fragmentation of our mind. Right. And then you have a fragmentation relationally, right? So along with, again, the smartphone and social media, now you have the ability to find your tribe. You have the algorithms that support that tribe. Now you can surround yourself with people who think exactly like you. And what happens is you develop a fear of your neighbor, right? And as Christians, here is this Trinitarian example of love that shows us this is the stability. We are united, and the devastating consequences of that division from when we begin to fear our neighbor because of what's different. You see that in families, you see it in communities, even in parishes. And so there's that fragmentation. And then as Cynthia talked about, you have the physical fragmentation of our bodies, how we just spent a week on a homestead at St. Basil's Farm with Olympia Rusu, who is working with us on this program. And as I was observing them gardening, you could see the symbiotic relationship between God and man with how we nurture ourselves. And here God designs these seeds, and then we prepare the soil, we plant those seeds, we weed them. God provides the sun, He provides the miracle of growth, right? And now we consume this gift He's given us. Our bodies respond to it with healing, and we have gratitude, and it's a beautiful, holistic approach to nourishing our bodies. So now you fragment that. We've walked away from that. We have our food ultra processed from chemicals. We've completely lost the spiritual aspect of eating. So now what was once an act of gratitude and community has become something that is almost food as an enemy. It's confusing. It and then you could see these are the effects. This is like the subtleness of this fragmentation that causes that chronic stress that is making us sick.
I was thinking, I was reading recently Blaise Pascal wrote this, and I think it's so appropriate to what we're talking about tonight. He said, "A man finds nothing so intolerable as to be in a state of complete rest, without passions and without work. Then he feels his nothingness, loneliness, inadequacy, dependence, helplessness, and emptiness." It's almost like we are living in a world where it's like, and we've oftentimes talked about this, Roxanne, is that I think for a lot of people, it's almost becoming a badge of honor to say that I'm just so busy. You very rarely ever say, I'm doing absolutely nothing. Everything is great. I'm taking the Sabbath. I'm connecting more to my faith, to the world around me. We're actually seeing that the opposite. You ask that question and people are like, I'm just so busy. I'm so tired. And I think for a lot of us, as you beautifully stated, both of you, Cynthia and Molly, I think for me, I just would add that I think this is a spiritual battle that we face, and it's so, it's unassuming. We don't even realize it because we just kind of we just get caught up in the routine of life. And I know, Roxanne, we talk about this a lot, just the routine of life every day, not realizing. And then sometimes when we take a vacation, we're like, wow. I know it's happened to us many times. We're just like, 3 days into the vacation, we're like going, wow, this is like how it should be. And we oftentimes will tell ourselves, especially early on in our marriage, we would say stuff like, when we get back, this is how we're going to be, just wanting to kind of get back to that place of just wholeness, because you don't really realize just how much you're being, as you said, fragmented throughout our world. And anyway, I'd love to just kind of, in your own, I guess, for me, I think that I look at it like it's a spiritual battle, because I think that ultimately what this does is, as you were saying, Molly, earlier, is that it separates us from God, and it separates us from the purpose that God has. It separates us from others. We know that. It separates us from really fulfilling our purpose, and it separates us from God. And I think it's one of the things that, like I said, if we're not aware of, I think the enemy's just going, keep piling it on, because really no one's really going to give you the break or the opportunity to return back to that wholeness unless you're intentionally doing it on your own. Would you agree with that, both of you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You said the key word, intentionally. You have to intentionally, because this really goes against what the world is telling you. And
Right.
that's why we started Filled with Less, because the world is telling you more, more, more. You need to do more. You need to be more. You need to have more. And we're saying, no, slow down, be intentionally countercultural.
Right.
And you'll be fine with less, and in fact, you'll be better with less. And really, the word that always comes to my mind is stewardship. So one of the things that we like to talk about when we give retreats is just starting out with the moment that you were conceived, like the moment the cells came together in your mother's womb, you were given two major gifts, your life and your body. And we have to be super intentional about being good stewards about both of them. And that includes time management and boundaries and relationships and everything that goes into your body, and respecting the sleep that God gave us, because so many fabulous things happen in our bodies and our brains while we're sleeping. And yet all these good things He's given us to be good stewards are being undermined by our culture that's saying, no, more and more and more and less of that.
Yeah, and I think too, I think for sometimes and I'd love to hear your thoughts too. I think we've talked about this, Roxanne, I know, but I think it'd be great for our listeners to hear as well. I think for a lot of people too, we kind of misunderstand our own Christian faith, and we look at what we're saying on the show in some ways as being, a little bit self-centered or too focused on ourselves, and we kind of just totally miss it totally about what we're really called to do, and how Christ tells us that there's the honor of the Sabbath, and how Christ himself went away and retreated and took time for himself. And I'd love to, maybe Roxanne, you could start this out, but I'd love to kind of hear, maybe just from a Christian perspective, how essential that is for us as people of faith to take that time to be self-aware and to be making the steps that are intentional, as we were talking about, being intentional about taking care of the body that God has given us, and utilizing the things that God has given us, these gifts, to help fulfill what his dream is in all of us.
Yeah. Molly, do you want to start with that?
Yes, Cynthia and I love that she used the word stewardship. I think Originally we talked a lot about orthodox or self-care, and I think stewardship is actually a better word, because the whole reason is God has, like you said, we have a purpose on this earth, right? We are here to connect with our purpose, and using that garden analogy, He has provided the seeds in each of us, the fruits of the Spirit, our own unique gifts and talents, and now He is saying, okay, cultivate that soil through stewardship, through taking care of your spiritual life, through that stillness, through connecting with Christ. Take care of your physical health so you have the energy to nurture those seeds, to do the work I put you on here on earth to do, and to bear fruit. And we cannot connect with that purpose or bear that fruit when we are exhausted, when we are outraged, when we are anxious and despondent. That is the easiest way for the devil to keep us fruitless and not connecting with our purpose. And when we're not connecting with our purpose, we feel aimless,
right?
And we feel totally discontent, because we were here to do this, to do what we were here created to do, to spread light as only we can. But we have to take care of the gifts He's given us and water those seeds to do that.
And so I'm curious as to what obstacles you guys think we might face in trying to live sort of countercultural, because I love that term, countercultural. What do you think the average individual might run into in terms of the obstacle to truly embracing, a life with that counterculture foundation?
I think that we have been raised to meet other people's expectations instead of our own. Our kids' schools are telling us what we need to do and when we need to do it. Their sports are telling us when we need to, do it. Sunday mornings, are you on the soccer field or are you in liturgy? It's hard to say no, to know I'm not going to be on the soccer field, right? So there's peer pressure, even as adults, parent pressure. And that's hard. And then you go out to eat and everyone's having the, whatever, fried this and beer and whatever, right? You're with your friends and you're saying, no, I'm just going to have, let's say, water and carrot sticks. No, I mean, that's really taking it to the other level. But,
right.
But you're getting that, no, eat the toxic food, right? Have really poor boundaries. Really poor time management skills. Don't say no. You need to please because you want people to like you. I think that we're raised with that message just pounding in our heads, and we don't know how to be different, and that's a huge obstacle.
Yeah, that's so true. It is so automatic to consider other people's perceptions and worry about that, and judge ourselves for sort of not being part of the crowd. And not to mention, I think so much of that are things that people use to escape their real problems. So, I think in moving countercultural, you also have to fight it just feels so good, those sort of short-term blissful moments of French fries, that may temporarily remove all of your life's problems, only to return to greater problems. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I love that, moment of consideration of what expectations am I really living by? And Molly, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes we think we need such a massive change in our life to experience relief, when it's really just small tweaks to our daily habits. Practicing the pause is so powerful. But you have to wake up in the morning. The first thing you do in the morning, let's say for instance, like you open your eyes, right? You have two choices. You can grab the phone from your bed to turn off your alarm and immediately start looking at things, right? In your bed, before you start your day. Now your passions are going, you're already thinking ahead, right? How subtle then to, instead of doing that, put the phone aside, get an actual alarm clock. The first thing you do in the morning, take a deep breath. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And at that moment, you are setting your intention to look at every choice you make throughout the day and pause to ask yourself, is this going to energize me or deplete me? Right? And so it's just in the beginning of your day, making that choice, and having a little bit of time to, before you start your day, connect with God. Please be with me. And I am here, like this day counts for something. You know, this is not an aimless day. This day is an important day. And everything I need in this day, all of the insights, all of the discernment, all of the opportunities for growth are in my minute-to-minute decisions when I overcome a temptation to do what is depleting. When and we think it's like, I don't know, like out there somewhere is where all of the battle takes place. Most of it is so quiet, and it's in our minute-to-minute decisions of, am I going to keep my mouth shut, or am I going to lecture, or am I going to listen? You know, am I going to take those things off my phone that constantly distract me from my job, or am I going to cave into it? So, I mean, that's where the spiritual battle takes place. So I think just recognizing when you wake up in the morning that that's what's happening, and realize it's a kind of a big deal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to just give our listeners an opportunity to call in. We'd love to hear from you. We're talking really, how do we get back to the wholeness, to the newness that Christ created us to be in? And we'd love to hear from you. You have a question or a comment for Molly or Cynthia, feel free to call us. We'd love to hear from you at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. And feel free to leave a comment. If you're watching us on Ancient Faith's YouTube page, please feel free, or on the Louhs. We also are broadcasting on the Louhs YouTube page, on the Louhs Facebook page. Feel free to leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you as well. Again, that number is 1-855-237-2346. Molly, I will tell you just as a priest, and more importantly, just as a man. I mean, for me, if I get up in the morning and if I attempt to look at my phone, I'm done. Because it just immediately takes me off, and I don't think clearly. I don't have the lucidity that I need to have for my thoughts, because immediately the first thing that I see will oftentimes take me on this kind of, just
Train.
on this. You just end up going all off course. And so for me, I have to, it's like almost one of these non-negotiables that Nick Lowe has to have, that I need to at least take that moment. And I love how you say just a moment of just simply pausing and connecting, because that stuff is going to stay there. It's going to be there. But as we talked about this earlier, I mean, I think that the enemy is the author of distraction. He loves to create what we call weapons of mass distraction. He just distracts us with all these different things, and we just keep going on the rabbit holes of these different things, not realizing how much they're draining our energy, because we only have a certain amount of bandwidth, each of us does, and how much these different trails take us and lead us off of really what the purpose that God has. And I love how you were mentioning earlier to both of you, we don't talk about this a lot, because and for a church that really focuses so much on fasting, obviously for the prayerful part, not so much as the dietary stuff. But I mean, you can't forget the fact of what we are consuming and the amount of toxins that we are consuming, and we are wondering why we are, oftentimes very, very exhausted. We're not taking care of ourselves well. We're not walking. We're, I think, Roxanne, you were reading a study or something recently where I think where we were saying that we're exercising more now because we're trying to deal with. We're eating a lot more as well. That's the problem. So we're not only are we, yes.
So as the gym memberships have gone up, our weights and obesity have increased. So we're doing something wrong, right? We are all getting gym memberships, and some of the research was basically saying we're trying to sort of replace activity that's meant to be spent all day long in an hour, like at a gym. And biochemically it doesn't translate, right? So going to the gym for an hour is not the same as somebody who's walking and active all day long. And so the challenge, the scientist, she said, listen, like every 2 to 3, every hour, you should walk about 3 to 4 minutes, like just get up and walk for 3 to 4 minutes. And if there's anything that you can do standing instead of sitting, you alter that. And so these small changes are to our bodies actually more profound than actually going to a gym and getting on a treadmill for an hour. So all the things that we've tried to do in sort of modern science to get back to the basics are not actually working. They're not translating because it just wasn't the way the body was designed. And, and Cynthia, I'd be curious as to your take on this, but, I was reading a lot of research on how insulin resistant our population as a whole has become, and that people are really struggling to make better choices at restaurants or at home or in grocery stores because their bodies have sent them into a space that, they need or crave or demand sort of a different, type of food that's obviously more processed. And the body is not, desiring of these other foods. It's just kind of like they haven't had the reset. And, scientists are saying, if we can kind of fix that train of insulin resistance, we're just not going to have all these people who are eventually diabetic. But this is sort of the struggle in people trying to lose weight, who can't lose weight, who say, well, I can't eat healthy. My body, I can't, I need the other stuff, and I can't say no. And so there's this real fragmentation. I love that word, between, I think, what the body needs, but what the brain will allow when it's been on a bad system, on a faulty system. With all the processed foods, and it's a vicious cycle because it's what's available, it's just every time we get in a plane, I'm always like, so where's the healthy choice, when they're coming around with the juices and the chips and the pretzels, it's like very difficult to find, food that would actually be good for us on that flight. But that just epitomizes, I think, society as a whole. So, Cynthia, sort of your background in health, I'd love for you to kind of maybe speak into that for people who are listening going, hey, this eating thing, it's really hard when my body is kind of out of whack.
Yeah, gosh, Roxanne, there's so much there that you just touched on. A lot of people are on a blood sugar roller coaster, where their cells are just saying no more, no more, when insulin comes knocking and wants to enter, and the cells are like, I can't take it anymore. And the bodies are on blood sugar roller coasters because too many refined food products, too many, and I always hate to say carbohydrates because there are so many good carbohydrates out there, right, with fruits and vegetables and everything. But the refined carbohydrates are what's really hurting us, and they aren't obvious all the time. It's not like the pretzels and the bread and the pasta that just stare at us like, yes, I'm a refined carbohydrate. It's being put in other foods that we're eating that we think are wholesome. Even the animals we're eating that are being fed refined carbohydrates and are becoming sick animals, and we're eating those. So something else that puts us on blood sugar roller coasters is stress. So when you're under stress and that's putting pressure on your adrenal system and causing inflammation and causing your digestion to go awry, your blood sugar is spiking and all over the place. And recently I had to use a blood glucose monitor on myself. And it was so interesting because I had to wear it during a time period where Molly and I were speaking at a couple church retreats, and I saw it going up and down and spiking, even though I was eating fine. And then I would come home for 4 days before we went to another retreat, and it would even out. And it's just another hidden reason why stress is so harmful to our body.
Were you aware that you were stressed though at that? Because sometimes I find that we on our phones, we have on our iWatch, Roxanne likes to monitor my heart rate, and so she's monitoring everything about me. But we have it, so you're, sometimes when I'm not even aware of how like my heart rate may be up, maybe it's right before a speaking engagement as well, or even just things in general. I'm not even aware of it. Did you find yourself as you were doing that you were aware of the stress that you were kind of going through at that time?
So at times I did, because I do get nervous before we speak. It's a nervous that, I just want to be the best I can be and
right.
and everything. But then there were other times when I felt like I was just fine, but it was still doing it.
Right.
It took me coming home and being in my home environment and everything to calm down. Mm-hmm. But it's
I love that. I think that, again, going back to this level of just awareness about what we're ingesting, what we're allowing to ourselves to choose. And I think, I remember someone telling me one time that they used the word busy as an acronym for bound under Satan's yoke. And it just, I think it just, I don't know if people truly realize just when we're so busy. And we're talking about, obviously, almost like this unproductive busyness, just busy just to be busy. And hopefully on the second half of our show, we're looking forward to what you guys are going to talk to us about, some specific ways that we can really kind of come back to that wholeness, and really about your new ministry. We want to hear all about that. So let's take a quick break. On the other side of this break, we're going to talk to Molly and Cynthia about their new ministry and how that we can all kind of join together and to kind of come back to this wholeness that God yearns for us to be. So stay right with us here on Live with the Louhs.
Live with the Louhs with Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne will be back in a moment. Give them a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. They would love to hear from you.
We venerate your immaculate icon, O good Lord, and entreat you to forgive our offenses, O Christ our God. By your own choice, you were pleased to ascend the cross in the flesh to deliver us, whom you created, from our slavery to the foe. Therefore we cry to you with gratitude. You have filled all things with joy, O our Savior, by coming to save the world. AtheniteUSA.com offers holy icons for those wishing to plant something spiritual in their souls. Immaculate 22-karat gold leaf hand-applied on solid wood. Use the code FAITH for free shipping. Come and see. AtheniteUSA.com.
We're back with Live with the Louhs and Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne. Do you have a question for the Louhs? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here once again is Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Live with the Louhs. So grateful that you're joining us on this fun show. I think this is a show that I think is going to be one of those that's going to be downloaded many, many times as to how we can kind of slow down in many ways, smell the roses, but really, more importantly, how to become better stewards of what God has given us in our physical health, our mental health, and our spiritual health. We're speaking to two very good friends of ours, Molly Sabourin and Cynthia Damaskos. So excited. They have a podcast right here on Ancient Faith called Filled with Less. And we'd love to hear from you. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. Or feel free to leave us a comment if you're watching us on the Ancient Faith YouTube page. Leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you as well. I think I'd love to have both of you answer, so maybe I'll start with you, Molly, just to kind of get us started. I mean, I think for many people that are listening to the show tonight, they're watching the show, or maybe even they're downloading this later on, and they're like, okay, this sounds great. I know that I need to do this. How do I get started? Like, what are some practical steps that we can start tonight to really kind of get back to that wholeness that God yearns for us? I think you're.
Going.
Yeah,
there she is.
There you are. Okay. Yeah,
okay, good. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. This is the part that really lights us up because there's such good news. Like I the first half, I know you're talking when you talk about maybe what's causing it. It can seem really down and hopeless, but it's not. There are so many beautiful ways to return to wholeness that aren't that hard, really. And it really starts with mindset, first of all. And like Cynthia talked about, you have to adopt an abundance mindset. So we have the scarcity mindset. All it can see is what could go wrong, what's not working, what you've lost, right? And that abundance mindset looks at all that you do have, all the ways God has blessed you, all of your many blessings. And when you live in that mindset, it's like opening a window and letting light flood in to your life, right? And once you begin to live in the light of Christ, you see light everywhere. So switching your mindset is the number one thing to do. And we do that through a lot of ways. Inner work is so important. So journaling, spending time where you are, like in the morning, first thing in the morning, maybe I will look at the day before and say, when did I start to experience inner turmoil? What was happening? What was I reading? What was I listening to? What was I thinking about? And you can start to see patterns of ways that things that kind of trip you up, and to start to recognize inner turmoil is not something that should just be something like a chronic state. Like, this is a sign that something is off. Run back to Christ, figure out what it is, right? My favorite analogy of that is like when you're driving on the highway and you accidentally veer over into those bumps, like you're not going to drive that 20 miles. You're like, oh no, get back on the path. And I think a lot of times we feel the stress and live like that, like for years, as just like a normal way. So that inner work helps us to really like realize our default state, inner state with Christ is peace. That's what he promised, transcendent peace. But to have that peace, you have to have gratitude, you have to be connecting with him, you have to have stillness, turning to thoughts that are hopeful, that are beautiful, that are good, making sure you're not letting content in that you can't handle. So that means a lot less information, shutting down the news. You got some serious boundaries around what we call your bubble of calm. And starting to be familiar, like what punctures that, what feeds it. So it's just that awareness. And just by doing that, you can be a lot more responsive. As soon as you feel that inner turmoil, walk away, shut it down, turn it off, swat it away. Lord have mercy, think of something to be grateful for. So just that's a great place to start, is just that recognition and that vigilance, a lot of vigilance.
Cynthia, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
I think that it's also really important to surround yourself with people who are like-minded. I always remember the Jim Rohn quote, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If you want to make some changes in your life, who are you spending that time with? And there are some wonderful communities out there, like the Filled with Less community, but wonderful communities of like-minded people who want to up-level their lives and live their lives for Christ and come back to wholeness and become less fragmented and do the work intentionally, do the things that Molly was just talking about, holding each other accountable, maybe getting together for tea on a weekly basis, maybe having a little table in coffee hour where you guys congregate after liturgy and just ask each other, how did your week go? Knowing that you're with like-minded people, it makes a huge difference.
I love that.
Yeah, go ahead, Roxanne, if you were going to add it, and if you were going to make a comment.
No, I love those notions. I mean, what we surround ourselves with is so absorbable. And I know, certain people are much more likely to catch a cold. Same thing with, our emotions, much more likely to catch emotions and lack of peace. And once it's there, it's caught. It's really hard to sort of get rid of it. But I do think, I love that quote about 5 people, that you are the average of that. And, I think everyone really gives us something different, and really looking like, if I struggle with hope, who in my life seems to always have hope? If I struggle with discouragement, who in my life's an encouraging voice? And if I struggle with anxiety, who has courage? Who's willing to step out of their comfort zone and kind of simplify life? Because I do think God kind of puts these examples in our path and in our community of things that we need to borrow. And I oftentimes feel, and I use this with my clients a lot, if you don't have cognitive clarity, you can borrow that from others, at a time where you feel completely foggy. Someone in your midst is not, and we forget sometimes to use community. I think that is not something we, in our society, it's not exactly a collectivist culture here, and isolation and individual work is really encouraged and rewarded in our society. So I think we often forget that God didn't design us actually that way. And the power of community is profound for our soul. And so I think, even to listeners to really think, okay, who in my world am I able to kind of borrow some of the qualities that I might need most when I don't have them? Because chances are you're providing something that someone else needs as well.
And I was thinking, just, to kind of add a little bit to what you were sharing, Molly, I would love to kind of dig a little bit deeper with the mindset and how, maybe if you can share just some more or some additional practical ways to kind of help us to do just that. I know you mentioned about journaling, but I think, for a lot of people, there's obviously what we're talking about is hopefully that there's going to be a level of awareness that a change needs to take place. When you study your life, when you look at what you're going through, when you look at your relationship with Christ, the church, your own, what you're feeling, hopefully that there's a level of awareness as you're hearing our voices to our audience we're speaking to. But I'd love to maybe speak a little bit about how powerful it is to journal and how powerful it is to really focus in, tomorrow morning when you're getting up on this mindset, setting that right course. I love how the Bible says, keep your mind set on higher things, not on earthly things. In other words, it says set your mind. So it's not even a question. It's almost like you have to just push that in your mind. Like I have to start setting my mind for heavenly things, not earthly things. Because earth will lie to us, as we all know, and will deceive us. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about some ways that we can do that, practically speaking.
Well, one of the most beautiful things that we have in Orthodoxy is this is the hesychism, which I think is something unique with Orthodoxy. And the beautiful thing about hesychism is all of the stress takes place in the noise of our heads, our thoughts. We think that we are our thoughts. It's so noisy and chaotic. And what hesychism allows us to do, the Orthodox spirituality, is to descend from the noise in our head into the quiet of our hearts. And I actually when I think about our soul as a living room, and it's a place where if you ignore that inner life, like your house, you don't spend time there in quiet, it gets a little cluttered, it gets cobwebby, it gets dusty. Maybe you have the radio turned up in there all the way so it's loud, and Christ is coming to the Holy Spirit's coming to speak with you, to comfort you, knocking, and you're not even there to open up that door, right? So now you don't spend time here. It's chaotic out there. It's chaotic in here, and you literally have no place to rest, right? And so by leaving the chaos of your mind and coming into your heart, you can begin to adorn that space through stillness. So now you begin to adorn it with scripture, with edifying books, with stillness, with quiet, with hospitality and gratitude and beauty. And now you're cleaning out that space. Now it's quiet. You can hear it, let the Holy Spirit enter. And you have a place to retreat to when the world is loud and chaotic. You have cultivated a beautiful place to rest in your own heart. And that's a lot of inner work.
We've got a few minutes before the end of our show, and I just wanted to invite our listeners once again to call us. If you have a question for Molly or Cynthia, you can call us at 1-855-237-2346, 1-855-237-2346. If you wish to remain anonymous, please feel free to do so. Our amazing producer of our show, Matushka Trudy, will make sure that takes place. I guess this question for both of you, Molly and Cynthia, what if you're dealing with, as we just received a YouTube question, And I'll just read what she says. She says, my toddler is chronically ill and needs multiple surgeries. How do I handle this? Your advice is beautiful, and I think that is what I need, but our family is hurting. So I just kind of want to build on what she was saying in this question. I mean, how do we deal with when we have a chronic issue, or obviously our child in this case, but oftentimes we have issues that don't seem to necessarily go away. There may be things that we're dealing with, a health scare, maybe there's a relationship problem that we're going through, things that just that are beyond just simply external in our workforce or in what the world is, but maybe even our inner world. We're dealing with something that how do we take that time? How do we take that wholeness and create that when we have something so chronically happening every day?
Gosh, that's a hard one. And I think we've all, I think you mentioned at the beginning of the show, we've all had kind of our 9/11 moments. I mean, I know I've definitely had those things where it was very scary, very heartbreaking circumstances. And in those moments, the only recourse is complete surrender. I mean, where you attach yourself to Christ and you try nothing. I mean, I think so much of the time we try to feel brave. We try to feel strong, and we think we can, and sometimes it gets us to the point where, to me, it's like you're lying on your back on the altar and saying, God, you must do everything. And to be in that kind of spiritual surrender, where then at this point you are living minute to minute. You are in the present moment. You are not thinking 2 hours from now. You are not thinking tomorrow. But God's strength is made perfect in weakness in the present moment. That's where that strength is. And I think those arrow prayers are really good. That first maxim for Father Thomas Hopkos, 55 Maxims, when I start to feel terrified, just to say over and over, be always with Christ and trust Him in everything. Be always with Christ, trust Him in everything. It could be a line from a psalm, but to fill your mind with something from the Scriptures, and try not to overthink during those times either. But you have to rest as much as possible in Christ, and be so gentle with yourself.
That's such great advice. Cynthia, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
To me, so just going on what Molly is saying too, to me, this is ultimate self-care. Like, I don't think people think of surrendering to Christ as self-care, but it is. I think we all tend to walk around with these heavy burdens on our shoulders. Our children are sick, and there are issues at work, and we have financial problems and everything. You're just carrying that all around. You're taking care of yourself when you just sit in silence. Just listen to your breath. Don't try to think. Don't try to solve. And just say the Jesus prayer or whatever prayer comes to your mind, and just keep resting in Him. That will put you in a place to surrender. Because it's super hard to do if you're not doing that self-care and you're just running around trying to put out all the fires yourself, because then you're so overwhelmed just going to God and saying, help me, help me. I mean, that's okay. A lot of us do that, right? But this is where, like, intense self-care really comes in handy. Keep that silence in the morning. It might just be for 5 minutes or 3 minutes. Do what you can and just rest in Him. That'll reset you, that'll lower your cortisol levels, and it'll make you more able to handle what comes your way.
That's beautiful. I love the notion of surrender, because I'm sure so many listeners who can relate, whether it be a chronically ill child or just like a lot of people have a chronic, big stressor, a difficult, that invokes a lot of worry. And so in the final few minutes of our show, I'd love for you guys to both speak into what kind of community opportunities your ministry offers, and tell us about the Back to Basics course that you guys are offering.
Well, people may know us from our course that we've been offering since 2020 called 6 Weeks to Sanity, which is more of an intense lifestyle change, and it has a lot of inner work related to it, and it's pretty life-changing. This is bringing, back to basics, is bringing more fun and joy and hobbies and getting back to the joy and the beauty and the abundance that God has given us in this life and from this earth. So we have 10 weeks where we go into a lot of things. In fact, I'll list them. If that's okay. You'll see how complete this is. It's kind of fun. It's 10 weeks, and we have live sessions every Saturday, but during the week, the first one is mindset. We always start with mindset. So it's called Know Thyself. So it's all about where you are today and what you need. Then the second week is rethinking how we view food, because a lot of people have very complicated relationships with food, right? And that's not what God intended in Genesis, right? Here's the garden, here's some animal products, go for it and live your life, right?
Right.
The creative beauty of bread, we're going into long fermentation of sourdough bread, complete with recipes. In fact, this whole course, we have a 150-page ebook that comes with the course, so it has all kinds of stuff. Reuniting with our food heritage, getting back to eating the way God intended, animals that are being raised the way He intended. What does that mean? What does that look like? How far have we gone? Rediscovering the joy of cooking and celebrating the art of eating. We get into the beauty of food, the rhythm of food preservation. We're going to be canning and freezing and doing a lot of different things, preserved lemons and a bunch of fun things too. A beginner's guide to medicinal herbs, and then natural remedies for your most concerning health issues. So even those 2 weeks in themselves is sort of like a course in itself, learning how to use all these things God gave us. Creating a healthy, wholesome home and what that looks like, and it's going to involve things like candle making and flower arranging and just bringing in some really fun, clean, wholesome activities. And then hospitality, sharing the harvest. So it's about sharing all the goodness with others and what that looks like, and not being afraid of having people over to your home. And so Molly, you jump in, but we're so excited about this. Like she said, we just got back from Olympia's farm, and she's homesteading now. She moved from the Bay Area to North Carolina, and she's really an inspiration.
You said it so well, but yeah, there's so many lessons I already learned just from being there that week. And again, this is for people who have, like, you can live in a studio apartment in New York, and there's still elements of this. It's not, when we say food preservation, really it's learning, like last week I learned that if I, instead of throwing away my vegetable scraps when I'm chopping vegetables, keep them in a freezer bag in your freezer. When it's full, make stock out of it and soup. And so it's new, gentle rhythms that you're learning that are so fulfilling and beautiful. And we have intuitive cooking, knife skills. So relearning to have confidence in your kitchen and to love and to, like, if you're not going to farm, get to know your local farmer. You know, think about, find joy in where you source your food, from farmers markets, from interactions. And so that kind of countercultural way, it's kind of back a return. A lot of us were raised on the power of convenience, right? Like TV dinners, and like this was supposed to be these liberating innovations. So it's kind of like a lot of us have to come back to this. Like there's a lot of joy in actually getting your hands dirty and creating beautiful meals yourself. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
And I love that. That's so, I mean, you know, we're in this Paschal season, and I think it's so important to remember, you know, when you were mentioning this, Cynthia, I thought immediately that came to my mind was St. John Chrysostom's Easter sermon, because the Passover meal was always meant to have and to be celebrated with people. You were supposed to invite people over to celebrate the Lamb, and how in that beautiful sermon, that epic, if you will, sermon that is probably the most popular sermon of all time, outside of Scripture, outside of the Bible itself, I mean, in which he's really nudging us and encouraging us to invite, that the table is full and that we are to invite people to come and partake of that. And I think one of the ways that we celebrate that is in many ways, kind of building on what you're saying, is having that hospitality and that experience, that whole process from the beginning to the end. So I'm so grateful that you both came, and I love what you guys do. I know we love your ministry, and I just encourage you, all of you that are listening. I'm sure you all know, but if you don't, check out all Filled with Less right here on Ancient Faith Radio. And let's talk a little bit. We only have about 30 seconds, but where can they find out information about the program?
If they go to filledwithless.com, and you could do /B2B, or it'll just come up on the main site. And if they put in the Louhs, they'll get a discount on the cost of the course.
Awesome. Okay, that's so
awesome.
cool. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for doing that. And thanks, Molly, as always, for being with us. We love you both, and wish you both much success in your ministry.
Absolutely. We're going to get back to basics.
Yes.
I love that.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, you guys are
guys.
great. You absolutely are great. And thanks all of you for joining us this evening. We're so blessed that you're with us as well. Join us next Tuesday as we have a brand new Live with the Louhs show at 8 p.m. on Tuesday evening. My friends, stay strong in your faith, and God bless you.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of the book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan, which can be purchased at store.ancientfaith.com. Their daily inspirational messages can be found at thelouhs.com/subscribe. Be sure also to search for The Louhs on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Live with the Louhs is a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.